Stocks in the digital asset space is up 10% today, and it's because there's a very large buyer out there. You'll be surprised who it is, but we won't be. Bang!
It's back.
Clapper's back.
Nice. Good to see it.
So welcome to the Rebel's Edge, folks. He is Pete Najarian, and I'm Jon Najarian, and I'm down here in Puerto Rico. And Pete, you must be in Florida. You look like you're in the sunshine.
Sunny Florida. It's a beautiful day, but there's a little bit of pounding at my house, so I had to go to an alternate location, my daughter's house. So here I am.
A secret spot.
Right.
Well, another great day for trading, folks. And boy, we've had a bunch of them this year. We're going to start, as we always do, with the macro minute and break down for you what the big macro stories of the day might be. I'm going to say, Pete, it was industrial sentiment in Europe, which is about as macro as you can get in the United States. It hit a 6-month low. That is their industrial sentiment. What do the big industries in Europe think is going to be happening? They don't think a lot of good's going to be happening, is the answer, Pete. So that's my macro view right now.
Well, I'm going to give you a macro of this, John, the 10-year. And we've talked about it already before. I've talked about it recently about what's going on in the month of February, but I think it's important to actually break it down even a little bit further. From February 2nd until the 13th, we've gone from 380 up to almost, call it 4.3. Now, we've been stalled here at 4.3 for the better part of 2 weeks. One thing that could move that, PCE, that comes tomorrow. We're going to see, but right now, I got to tell you, that stands out the very most for me. I think that's almost as macro as you, but you probably got me bigger right now because you're talking about outside of the United States, and I'm just sticking with the U.S. right now. But that 10-year, keep an eye on what those levels look like.
Absolutely. And tomorrow, by the way, folks, 8:30 Eastern, we get that PCE number. So that is the Fed's preferred view of what's happening with inflation, going up or flattening out or going down. All right, Pete, let's hit the fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
Well, Pete, today on Fantastic Futures, I'm going to say Bitcoin because the Bitcoin futures at the CME are on fire. And they're on fire because MicroStrategy has been buying Bitcoins. And who knows, they could be trading the futures as well, Pete. And I'm going to say the fact that people are talking about Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, buying too. Well, that coupled with the ETFs, I mean, how much more good news could you get? The dang thing's up another 10% today, Pete, to 62,500.
Now, I could have jumped on your back and rode with you, John, because I think that is probably about as fantastic a future as you could get. I'm going to go back again to something, though, that I pointed out the other day, and that was cocoa. Now, year to date, John, it's up, I think, 43%. 1 year, it's up 123%. Now, you take a look at that chart, you're going to see something that has really ripped to the upside. We've already talked about it. We talked about chocolate. We've talked about the fact that it goes into a lot of medicines as well. So cocoa is in demand, and it's very difficult for the folks that obviously the supply side of it has not been easy. So with that all being said, today I was noticing we're finally seeing a little bit of a pullback. Now, we've seen adjustments before. We'll see how long this one is. It's off about 10%. So something to keep an eye on, but we'll see if that actually is sustainable moving to the downside or if this thing's just going to keep on ripping to the upside.
Well, it has been a heck of a ride, Pete. So certainly worth concentrating some of your gray matter on, folks. Let's talk, Pete, about eBay, because eBay put out numbers that were pretty extraordinary. Now, they're, of course, consumer discretionary play. Q4 earnings beat estimates pretty handily. And, Pete, that led to a nice 8% pop nearly in the stock. And that is why I think the stock is moving so strongly. But we also had unusual activity just yesterday. Just yesterday, because take a look at that, 227. It's the 28th of February today. They were buying eBay March 1st, expiring 46 calls. How much did they pay? 76 cents. Every option's for 100 shares, so that means $76. So for $760, you could control 1,000 shares of eBay between yesterday and Friday, because this upcoming Friday, these will basically go away. That is known as the expiration. Well, they went to over $2.30, Pete, maybe even higher now. So that's a triple. So if you invested $760, you turned it into $2,300 like that. And you had defined your amount of risk when you entered the trade. That's the reason we love these trades.
Yep, I love it, John. And I think it's always worth pointing out, because Unusual Options is here and it's here to stay. We're still averaging very close to 50 million contracts per day this year. So absolutely incredible to see what we're doing. Actually, 48 million this year, 50 million in the month of February. I'm going to talk about eBay from this standpoint, John. You talked about the earnings and so forth. How about the fact that their ad sales were up about 20% year over year? That's number one. Number two, they raised their dividend yield as well by a significant amount. And, oh, by the way, they decided, all right, we're going to do a share buyback of $2 billion worth of stock. So a lot of good things going on here. A lot of good reasons why we're seeing the stock move the way it is. Cash flow, $1.6 billion, John, and a strong guidance. And, oh, by the way, they also said, hey, look, we're using AI to make it that much more efficient on eBay to be able to search out what you're looking for and this, that, and the other. Just another reason to like what they did and how they're going to be going forward for eBay. I think this is a very, very impressive earnings that they put up today.
Yeah. And if you'd like, by the way, folks, to follow along with Pete, with me, with the thousands of folks that are our subscribers, you could join that group by going to marketrebellion.com/get started. That's marketrebellion.com/get started. All right. Now let's talk, Pete, about First Solar, because they reported Q4 results that beat estimates, but they missed on sales. That's the revenue side, of course. They also did offer positive forward guidance, which is one of those important things that Pete and I always focus on. So FSLR, very interesting report today, Pete. And certainly a lot of these solar stocks seemingly have bottomed. Do you think this one has?
I think it has, John. As a matter of fact, when you take a look at that 52-week and you look at it from 129 on the low side to 232 on the high side, and it's sitting at 150, this thing has plenty of room, I think, still in front of it. Obviously, it's just off of those lows. And you look at the PE right now. We talked about the earnings themselves, and that part was strong. It was the revenue that was a little bit of a weaker number, but not a whole lot, by the way, but just a small miss there. But I'm looking at it, John, when I look at a 10 PE for First Solar, and I look at what they are able to accomplish and what their earnings look like right now, and oh, by the way, they're expanding their capacity that they've got. That's going to actually get into that backlog a little. They're the leader. This is a company that is the leader in this space. And because of that, if I were to look at anything right now in the solar world, I think this is the name that you'd want to look at. This is the name you'd want to own.
Pete, from your lips to God's ears, I think this is one of those that should be at least a consideration. If you're thinking about some sort of green energy play, this one seems to be, both after that correction that you spoke of, Pete, as well as now some of these numbers, their guidance going forward. I think those are reasons to at least put it on your watch list.
Sure.
All right. Now let's talk about MicroStrategy. Yes, these guys have been buying up Bitcoins like crazy. Michael Saylor, he runs this company, Pete. And you know what? I think, in my opinion anyway, certainly, he's been doing a fabulous job. Not really running MicroStrategy as anything, though, but a Bitcoin buyer. I mean, I love you, Michael. I've spoken at a number of conferences with him, Pete. I find him a very interesting guy. But, this is not, if you looked up what the company started off as, this is not what the company you would expect to be making money from. But Michael was an early adopter. But that doesn't mean, Pete, that he was buying Bitcoins at $50 or $100. I think his average purchase price up until this last run was like $24,000. So he wasn't exactly early to the party, but boy, has he had, some guts and stuck through some tough drawdowns. And now he's really reaping those rewards.
He is, and he's taken off a very small chunk, John. I read that he sold 5,000 Bitcoin or something like that of the shares, rather, of MicroStrategy, excuse me. But he still seems to be in love with Bitcoin, and that has really treated him well. It's worth about $11 billion. I mean, when you think about that, it's not such a bad number. Unrealized gains of about $5 billion. This is amazing. Stock hit 52-week highs today of 988. It's been absolutely on fire. When you take a look at the price of Bitcoin, it's made this run, John. At some point, you would think there'd be some kind of an easing and a pullback, maybe. But when that happens, I don't know. Neither do you. Nor does anybody. But the reality is we've been on a run now from, call it 40,000 up to 50, up to 55, 57, 60, 62,000. This is a pretty incredible run. And if I would have any advice for Michael, not that he cares what I think, I'd probably trim up a little bit of Bitcoin, I think, right now, or figure a way to hedge it or something, because this is an absolutely incredible run. To your point, whether or not if his entire entry, let's say, just fractions out to 30,000, I wouldn't say that's such a bad trade, because at 62,000, that's a little bit of a double. I think that sounds like a pretty decent number, and I might be peeling off a little bit of that, I think, at this point in time, John.
Well, Pete, if you look at a one-year chart, I put the S&P 500 against MicroStrategy. The S&P is up 27% in a year. MicroStrategy is up 278%. That's what we call 10x.
That's a 10x.
So that's a 10x and a very interesting trade by Michael Saylor with MicroStrategy. All right, Pete. Now one that's a head scratcher for me. We've got Beyond Meat. So Beyond Meat, fourth quarter revenue was down almost 8%. And the guidance was not spectacular in the way I view it, Pete. So I'm kind of wondering why the stock was up almost 60% in the pre-market. But I'm sure you're going to tell me massive shorts, John, and the stock is just multiple, dollars off of its 52-week high.
Well, and the revenue missed by a lot, but it actually beat when you look at some of the things. So the revenue was down 7.5%, but they were looking for 66 million. They put in, let's call it 73. I'm just rounding up. But to your point, and where you were going is exactly right. You got 35% of the shares are short in Beyond Meat. Now, to call this a bit of a failure, I say would probably be a understatement. But this is a company that everybody fell in love with it. And then all of a sudden, when they decided not to be in love with it, it has been absolutely hammered to the downside, John. Matter of fact, volumes are a 10x kind of a day. Their volumes in the first 2 hours were 10x of a normal full day of trading. So it gives you a little bit of an idea. I think what people really grasped onto this time, though, John, is, hey, we're going to bring down these expenses. We're going to do a little bit of cost cutting. It's like, well, that's great, but how much can you do? And by the way, they have debt of $1.2 billion. So when I look at a company that just lost $2.40 in the quarter, that's pretty uncomfortable. Their revenue did beat, but it's actually down, year over year. It's down. That's not so great. I don't see a lot of positives, but I understand. And the short interest side of it certainly is, I think, a factor on why this stock made the kind of move that it did. And the fact that people just got a little bit excited about the cost cutting. I don't think that I like any of those reasons. And that's why if I were in this one, I'd take a look. I'm not a guy who shorts things, but I certainly would at least entertain the idea of looking at puts right now with the stock, the way it's run up, 44% or something like that?
Yeah. And it is, despite that move, despite this 44% move, it's down 60% in the last year. 60%. This was once, like you said, everybody fell in love with it. Well, now the only people that love it, except on a day like today, are the shorts.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about sports, Pete. Pete's Rebel Sports Zone right here, folks. The only place you can hear it and see it during the week is right here on the Rebels Edge. And of course, you can tune in on the weekends through Odyssey or WCCO radio to get his sports zone on the weekends. But let's talk NFL, Pete. What do you got?
Well, firstly, we got to do this square off you've got up there, John.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I always forget about the names.
I don't. I'm loving that thing. I thought this is one of the great moments I've seen in hockey in a while. But let's take a look and see why.
Yeah, a week ago.
Fight before they even dropped the puck.
Is this slap shot or was this
time on the ice of the National
This was his first time on the ice in the NFL.
Squaring off with Matt Martin.
And look at the size of him.
The 21-year-old is 6'7", 241 pounds.
And he's going against a veteran, one of the toughest guys in the league, in Matt Martin. Both of them know it's going to happen, and they are trading him here.
Martin 6'3", 215.
You know what?
Often they just nod and say, okay, that's enough. Not often that Martin's giving up that.
That is outstanding. It really is. You know what, John, though? If you want to be the next guy, the next thug in hockey, you go up against another thug and show them who you are and what you've got, and you don't wait for the game to even start. It is exactly the script of Slapshot. Paul Newman and Slapshot. I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah. New York Rangers. My gosh. That kid's a beast, Pete. 21 years old.
Yeah.
21 years old. And he's known in, I think, the AHL, Pete, as well as some of the juniors up in Canada for being, a fighter. So you can only imagine what those must look like up there.
Man, I got to tell you, hockey needs it, in my opinion. You and I both played. You were a goalie at one time in your life, and I was a defensive-man in my lifetime as well. And I got to tell you, there was the days of you had the big guys, the thugs that were out there trying to keep the peace. And then you had the guys who were the skaters out there, right? Then it moved to this whole thing of everybody's a skater. We're going to get rid of these guys pounding on people. I think that there's a lot of interest from folks, and I think this would be great for ratings. And I'm thinking the NHL is probably kind of doing this, going, yeah, let's bring it on. Let's bring these guys. I think it's great. Anyway, all right. So I'm going to jump to this one, John. The brothers, and it is a brotherhood in football, but how about the true blood brothers in the NFL? And I've got one for you that's going to be at the Combine, and he's going to put up some amazing numbers, I think. Because I'm talking about Christian McCaffrey. The whole family is athletic, right? I mean, you go to the McCaffreys, you look at the dad and on down, everybody is a baller, including mom. Everybody is a baller. And he's got a brother, Luke, who was a quarterback at the University of Nebraska, transferred to Louisville, and finished up, and he played 2 years at Rice as a receiver. John, as a receiver at Rice, 129 catches. Now, this is college football. Now, they usually don't get these kind of numbers. 129 catches, 1,700 yards, 19 touchdowns in 2 years. I think this kid, if he's there late for San Francisco and they want to go ahead and just grab him and put him in there with Christian, which both of them would love to happen, that could be pretty cool. But I wanted to run through this list, and then you might have a list or you might want to pick these, but you've got Peyton and Eli, right? The Mannings. You've got Jason and Travis, the Kelseys. You got the entire Watt family, right? I mean, there's hundreds of them, it feels like, everywhere. TJ, JJ, all these different acronyms. You've got Clay and Bruce Matthews, which I think the Matthews family is unbelievable because their kids are playing in the NFL as well. Then you've got so many other ones, Johnny. You've got the Long family. You've got the Harbaughs. You've got Vernon and Vontae Davis. I mean, where do you want to go? The Bosa family, right? Their dad was one of the killer bees at the Miami Dolphins. I mean, everywhere you look, Trevon and Stephon Diggs, you can look almost anywhere. So I guess my question for you would be, is there somebody I've left out? The Sharps? I don't know. Sterling? However you want to frame it, but who do you think are the best brothers ever? And it could be because they've got 3 or 4 of them or whatever, but is there somebody that you kind of pick and say, you know what, I look at this family and just think, how could they do anything more than what they've done? And I think that there are a couple of families who kind of fall into that category. For me, it's probably the Bosa family because it was dad, unreal. And these two guys, these two boys, have been absolutely spectacular pros. and seem to lead or be in the lead for the sack numbers every single year. But is there somebody else? I mean, Peyton and Eli are what the world says are the best two brothers ever to play in the NFL. What do you think?
Well, they're great, and they both have Super Bowl rings to show for it. And Peyton has Super Bowl rings from multiple teams, which is even more impressive, I thought, Pete. But I think the Matthews brothers and the Matthews family, because there's Bruce Matthews, Clay Matthews, and his sons, their sons, and they were just physical, great players. Yeah. And Clay had a hard time breaking in, but once he got in, he was all pro year after year after year. I would say, Pete, the only ones you left off that I would include would be the Selman brothers.
Oh, gosh. And I'm a Tampa guy. How did I? Yeah. We got a highway right up the road from me, John. Leroy Selman Highway. I missed that. That's on me.
No, but it's been a long time, and you were probably barely born when those guys were pros. But, yeah, Leroy Selman, Dewey Selman, and I forget the other, but all three of them were playing for Tampa. But to your point, Pete, the Bosa family is awfully impressive because, like T.J. Watt and J.J. Watt, both of them great pass rushers, tremendous defensive players. They're not just pass rushers; they're great defensive players. But the rest of their family, Eric Kumaro, who was part of their family, and like you say, the Killer Bees and all the rest. I think they might have had like as many as the Matthews play in the NFL, Pete. I mean, but anyway, the mom got remarried, and so that's why the names aren't all the same, folks, and so forth. But great players, and but I would just add the Selmans in there. I'm not saying they're better, but they deserve the accolade.
I'm going to say they are better. I can't believe I missed it, and that's my favorite group right there. And I was fortunate enough to be on the Bucs, have Leroy come over and talk to the team and all that kind of stuff. And one of the great guys of all time. I mean, these guys went to Oklahoma and turned that place. I don't know if they lost a game in their careers at Oklahoma, John. Jeez. That's how good those teams were when they were playing. Unbelievable. All right, so the next one. We got the top free agent right now as it stands. That could change in a minute, an hour, or a day, or whatever. But as of right now, Kirk Cousins. He's a quarterback. That's why everybody always focuses on quarterbacks, right? We understand how this whole game works. So he is the guy. And he's a guy who's been making really big money with the Minnesota Vikings. And he's going to demand really big money from the Minnesota Vikings or be in the free agent market, which I just thought it would be fun to try to figure out what is the best landing spot for him. And I'll give you my reasons of why I think it's Seattle, John. So here's what we've got. So Seattle, they've got Geno Smith, but Geno Smith is okay. I like Geno, but he's okay. He throws almost as many interceptions or half as many interceptions as he does touchdowns. That's a problem. This is a team that's got an average defense at best, but offensively, John, they've got Kenneth Walker III at running back. That kid is an absolute beast out of Michigan State. Great player. DK Metcalf, right? The wide receiver, unbelievable. Tyler Lockett, wide receiver, pretty unbelievable. They've got very good tight ends, including Fant, who's another one of the many Iowa tight ends who went into the NFL and went to Denver, and he was part of the trade for the quarterback. That idiotic trade, once again, biting him. And then you've got last year's Ohio State wide receiver, Njigbu, is another one, right? So he's got talent everywhere. If he wanted to go there, they were 9-8 last year. So despite the fact that Pete Carroll's no longer the coach, it's not because they went 3-14 or something like that. This was a team with a winning record. And if Kirk wants to go somewhere that is almost dialed up and ready, and the right quarterback, I think, puts him over the top, Seattle's not a bad spot for him to go, because I look at Washington, some of these other places. Washington's got too many holes, man. I think the Vikings, quite frankly, right now have too many holes to fill. So I don't know. Do you have a different landing spot for him right now, do you think?
No. I think I was going to argue for New England, Pete, but New England's in a massive rebuilding. Seattle is on the verge, and given that they've got DK Metcalf and all that, who, that guy with the right guy slinging him the ball should almost be breaking records in the NFL. He's so good and so fast and such a big body that he can just, use that big body to basically block out the D-backs.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that Kurt would love to be throwing to that kid. I think the Kansas City Chiefs, Chris Jones, I think is a difference maker. So I would love to see where he ends up, Pete. Josh Allen, the other Josh Allen from the Jaguars, the edge rusher. Can you imagine if some team was able to get both those two guys?
Right.
Josh Allen and Jones. I mean, that would be incredible. And then, Pete, as far as wide receiver, the one that really stands out whenever I watch him play is T. Higgins.
Yeah.
From Cincinnati. Now, not everybody gets to see Cincinnati as often, but that guy is a different level player as well.
Yeah.
So, again, who knows? Maybe if you signed up Kirk Cousins, Pete, and you have room, maybe you go after Higgins as well. I mean, the only problem there is there's not enough footballs. You only get one at a time.
Yeah, and these guys, John, there's a lot of franchise tags that are being put on guys as we speak. I'm already seeing some of them come flying by through my computer or whatever. But so that'll be a factor as well. Who's really a free agent? Who was just out there dangling out there that they finally said, all right, we're going to use the franchise tag on this guy. But you're right about that Josh Allen. And that's one of the reasons why the other day when I was looking at this, I was mentioning this to my guys this past Sunday too. I said, look, we seem to think that Danielle Hunter is old, and he's not at the Minnesota. It's funny, John. These guys didn't pay him last year. The reason he made $17 million was because with the way they work the money scheduling of everything in the NFL, they were able to get him incentives that got him to $17 million. But that wasn't his contract. That was with incentives. So you put him up in Detroit, and he's got Hutchinson on the other side, and you've got Danielle Hunter on this side. I mean, that's one player that suddenly makes that defense a heck of a lot better in a hurry, I think, up there in Detroit. So there's a lot of different things that could happen in the offseason. It's why the NFL is 24/7, 365, John. It's why we all care about the combine and free agency and the draft and everything else. And it's why I'm so excited about what's going on. And I can't wait to see these guys running their 40s and everything else. Even though it's kind of meaningless to me, it's still fun to watch just to see what athletes these guys truly are.
Yeah, I am the same. When I see them on Reels, Pete, or on TikTok, and I'm rarely on TikTok, but my daughters and my wife send me stuff on TikTok. So then I look at it. Next thing you know, I'm scrolling. But otherwise, I'm on Reels. And when I'm on Reels and I'm seeing, like that NHL fight or any of these crazy, freak show athletes doing whatever they do. Tomorrow, folks, we might show you some serves that'll just blow your mind from a guy that can serve 150 miles an hour, and how they might actually have to ban him, Pete, because it's to the point where I think he's hurting people because they can't get out of the way of that serve. And if it comes up and hits you, Pete and I both know that Mark Fisher was knocked cold.
One of the great moments of all time.
Yeah. And the Fish was one of the biggest natural gas traders in the world, folks. And we'll tell you the story sometime, but he was hit by a serve by Pete Sampras and knocked cold. Not almost knocked cold, just boom, straight down backwards onto his back. And it was at Flushing Meadows as an opener for the U.S. Open. So we'll tell you about that sometime. But we appreciate all of you tuning in. Please keep sending us input on what you like, what you'd like to see more of, and so forth. Remember, you can get that free book by going to itsnotanoption.com. Just the title of the book. You get it for free. You can claim it. Itsnotanoption.com. And Pete and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. All right.